Hello and welcome to Profiles in Risk. This is your host, Tony Cañas, and today I have with me Jenn Knight, CTO at AgentSync. Jen, how's it going today? Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It is going great.
Awesome, awesome. And today I happen to be recording from the Florida Insurance Advocacy Forum meeting. First time I come to this particular event out of many insurance events I do every year. Uh, and it is January 23rd. So of course the whole idea was come to Florida, good weather in January.
Oops.
Uh, Half the South is covered in snow.
Yeah.
Not here, but we have had just lots of rain and just like 45-degree temperature. So not exactly the Florida they promised us, but it's been a great conference. Uh, so uh, looks like you yourself are in Denver. So um you guys are used to winter, but you didn't get hit by the current storm that the
We
East Coast is suffering from.
no, but we got an edge of it. We got a nice Arctic blast over the last long weekend. I think it was 0 degrees in Denver on Monday. And then it had a nice swing back to 37 on Tuesday. So we're in the throes of icy roads and a little bit of snow, but that's par for the course in January in
Okay.
Denver.
But zero is very cold for you guys,
It's
right?
very cold. Yes,
Denver's
it's very
not
cold.
like the
Yeah.
Midwest where like
No,
Minneapolis that stays
no.
below zero for like 3 weeks. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Gotcha,
This
gotcha.
is cold for me. Lots of layers and maybe not going outside too much.
Okay, so for the listeners, we did have Niji, the other co-founder, I believe,
Mhm.
from AgentSync on episode 342 a couple of years ago. So I will include the link to that episode for those that want to dig in further, but not required listening before listening to this one. Uh, so we always give the guest a chance to give the elevator pitch. What is AgentSync?
It's a great question. And I'm actually now want to go back and listen to what Niji said 2 years ago. It'll be interesting to see a side by side. Niji and I co-founded AgentSync in 2018. And that was my entrance into the insurance space. So we focus in the US insurance market on helping get agents and agencies onboarded and access to products with carriers. And so that's really around distribution channel management. What does it look like to go through that process to get your license with NIPR, maybe get a new license in a non-resident state? How do you then take that and go apply with all the different carriers that you're ultimately going to work with? And how does that process ultimately get streamlined and in some cases and parts of it automated, but at least digitized across the US insurance market? So we came into the space with a bit more of a compliance focus because Niji had been at Zenefits. And we thought there's a lot of opportunity from a compliance perspective and a technology perspective to really streamline that process and unlock a lot more efficient workflows there. We realized ultimately, I think if you're an agent or even a carrier in this space, there's a ton of business efficiency gains that can be had when we're using data and automated rules in more real time to help facilitate that conversation. So we obsess about what it's like to be an agent in the US insurance market who's working to get access to a product and it has to go through all the steps of getting your license, keeping it up to date, maybe doing that yourself or working with your agency to do that, and then maintaining and establishing your relationships with all your carrier partners.
I am muted, of course. The first time in the episode, I always do that. Like
Yeah.
during the elevator pitch, I mute myself and then I forget to unmute. Okay. So I never worked in the agency side, but I am a former underwriter and especially a former sales manager for the carriers or what the agency is called marketing reps. And after my I think 3 years that I was a sales manager, uh, the I literally posted this on LinkedIn. The main advice I had for new sales managers is as soon as you get the job, fly to home office and make friends with the licensing
Yep.
people
Yep.
because you're going to need them. But like take them out to lunch, I think is what I posted,
Yeah.
because you're going to need them all the time.
Mhm.
Licensing in our industry is a nightmare.
Yep.
Historically has been a nightmare. Um, and yeah,
Yeah.
right. So that was from the carrier perspective, carrier dealing with agents. Uh, you you mentioned benefits.
Mhm.
So I happen to be living in the Bay
Yeah,
back when during the benefits time, and they weren't really PNC, but
yeah.
they were right very early in SureTech. Uh, cool execution. Uh, they played really fast and loose with compliance, right? Uh, Very much the Silicon Valley move fast and break things doesn't work in insurance, right? And benefits is the perfect example of that. So it's interesting that you mentioned them. So before AgentSync, what did the licensing process look like that you guys felt, okay, there needs to be a better technological answer to this?
Yeah. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with what you posted, right? Licensing is such a critical part of this workflow, and it is such a nuanced part of the workflow because every state does things a little bit differently. And so when we came in and when Niji went through his experiences and benefits, and the first problem statement we tackled was how do we think about standardizing the workflow for getting an agent onboarded across all 50 states plus the different territories in a way that will allow a company to scale responsibly and then also give them insight into what is happening for any agent in the workflow. And so that was where, when we kind of looked at this problem statement and we thought about licensing, Niji had seen it with benefits of to scale as quickly as they wanted to responsibly and making sure that they were checking all the boxes. We didn't feel like there was a good technology in the market to do that. And so originally it was really about compliance and growth. And I think in 2020, 2021, that was really compelling. Along the way, and we moved into so I was a technologist, and so I didn't know that I was supposed to think about this problem from a carrier perspective versus an agency perspective. So we had an opportunity when I first built the product to think about it from what are NIPR services and how do we think about making a product that allows us to access those services in a way that is not persona agnostic, but works for both parties. So our first product we did build for agencies, but then we quickly were able to expand it to work for the MGA use case and the carrier use case, because at the end of the day, it's a shared workflow between those parties, and everyone has a role to play with each other as well as with NIPR, and licensing is at the heart of it. So our first foray was to take a lot of the, what I'd say is burden on the licensing teams where they're having to have spreadsheets and memorize, okay, in Illinois, it's 14 for property and 16 for casualty. Those are probably not the right lines of authority, but on license class 3, we saw these teams who were spending a lot of this time cross-referencing that, super knowledgeable, but from a scale perspective, right, when you have a person doing that, it can be a lot harder. And so that was our first kind of aha moment, was how could we empower a licensing team to support, the person that, in your role as a marketer to go scale and get access to more agents, but do it in a way that aligns with the needs of the insurance regulatory compliance side. And then that opened up a whole workflow of, well, what does it look like to help an agent self-serve, and taking that burden off the licensing admin of going and sourcing the data? How do we validate data in real time with integrations with NIPR? And of course, the unravel began, and we got lucky enough in the early days to get to work with some of the newer entrants into the PNC market at Hippo and Lemonade at that time, who were trying to innovate and think about that scale. And then over time, we've obviously expanded into working with some more established folks who'd been in the game a long time. But it was a really great entry point to understand the complexity of the space and to think about what it would look like to open that up and make that workflow more visible, accessible, and more automated in some cases. How does that ultimately empower a carrier or an agency to write business faster?
Perfect. So now fast forward to 2025.
Mhm.
Um, so what does the platform look like today for, let's start with the agents.
Yeah.
So yeah, for all the independent agencies listening, how can you guys help?
Yeah, so we're actually in a really I'd say kind of moment of evolution for our business. So we started out and we really were selling to carriers and agencies and MGAs. And we did have features of our product. We do continue to have features of our product that are agent-facing portals. So some folks may have come across us. They may have, if you onboarded with Lemonade, you have actually gone through an AgentSync workflow for how do you get onboarded, how do you add your agents to your agency, and how you might conduct some of those workflows. Right now, we're really focusing on that evolution of because we serve both agencies and carriers and the agents, we actually have an opportunity to um, connect them on our platform and ultimately create a repeatable process for the agent that they can reuse the data they've already put into the system, and they can reuse that to apply to multiple carriers and not have to do so much typing back and forth. So I'm really excited about 2025 in terms of all of the learnings we've had organizationally on what does it look like to have the workflow inside the agency? What does it look like to have the workflow inside the carrier? And then what does it look like to have those workflows connected together? And what efficiencies can that ultimately mean for the agent, who right now is and their licensing admin partner, who's doing a lot of manual lifting to move data around or submit data across multiple parties. So that's our focus right now, is really evolving our platform to be one where when you're participating in the agenting platform, you're getting that connectivity with your key partners. And then we can unlock a lot more efficiencies for all parties involved in terms of how they're talking to each other and communicating as they're going through onboarding and a continued relationship management.
Okay. I always wonder about implementation.
Mm.
Uh, and as you have definitely learned in the time you've been in insurance now, uh, we're a pain because a lot of us are running on really old systems, getting
Yeah.
much better. But so luckily, it seems to me that the licensing piece, from my perspective, I might be incorrect, but it doesn't necessarily need to be deeply integrated with either my agency management system or my policy management system on the carrier side, or does it? Like how does that work with you guys?
Yeah, it's interesting. When we first came to market, I think we were doing more mid-market implementations, and those were a bit more standalone, where integrations weren't required maybe in the first pass. As we worked with larger folks in the space and the kind of the enterprise and strategic side, we found that for a lot of folks, and I this is very exciting for us, is that onboarding and then distribution, just management overall, right? Which is a whole life cycle. I don't just have one interaction with you. I onboard you if we have a good working relationship. You might be asking for access to a new product. You might be asking for access to a new state. You might be telling me that you updated your address or your name or whatever that is along the way. And then of course there's an offboarding or termination process. So when we think about all of those processes, they're actually highly integrated in the overall workflows and systems landscape of our larger customers. And so integrations with policy admin systems to trigger just-in-time appointing, for example, that's something that we can support. And that is a huge efficiency gain, and also can be a monetary gain for our customers in terms of being able to delay those appointments in the states that allow that. So we've really evolved from an implementation. While our core product can be stood up really quickly and you can just use it as is, we've found that a lot of our customers benefit from having both upstream and downstream integrations. And that's actually evolved our product landscape as well. So we have an API that is really about access to NIPR data in a more scalable and efficient way. We're coming out with additional APIs in that space because we understand that this workflow and this workflow data actually plays a huge role in a lot of different places. And if we can help you instrument it across the ecosystem, you're going to actually have the best set of efficiencies across your organization. I actually love insurance in the sense of uh, I never thought I would talk to someone about an ecosystem that had one-to-many mainframes in it. But the technical fun of figuring out how to think about, okay, you have this mainframe, it's running a core piece of your business. It thinks about data structures in this way. We have a relational database over here that's going to help you evolve that. How do we marry those together and kind of get you moving in the next direction is I'm obviously a bit of a nerd, is very exciting to me. I think it's a pretty impressive juggle that a lot of companies have. So we spend a lot of time with folks working through what are the integrations that are going to make them most successful with our product. We've been data first and API first from the start because I believe that that's actually how we help our customers get the best outcomes. Our data shouldn't be siloed. their workflow shouldn't be siloed. A different system can inform our system to trigger an event. We can inform your system to trigger an event, and that's going to actually be the best solution at the end of the day.
Okay, so it sounds like integration is possible even if we're not quite yet on Guidewire Cloud or Duck Creek, right? Even if we're still running some really old legacy pieces of technology.
Yep, it is. And obviously, it depends on what the ETL strategy and tooling is inside an organization. But I feel like insurance talks about itself sometimes as like, we're moving slow and um there's a lot to contend with, but I've been really impressed and enjoyed a lot of the conversations with our customers as we're talking about, our eventing frameworks and these more modern ways of connecting, and they're there. They're pursuing it. They're figuring out how to introduce that into their stack, which is is an interesting feat, right? When you're working with decades worth of technology. So um, I'm very excited for the insurance space over the next 5 to 10 years because I think there's a lot of great thinkers who are coming in and helping organizations or are already there, helping them think about how to bridge onto more modern technologies to help streamline processes across the board, not just, in our space, right? There's underwriting, there's so many moving pieces.
Fantastic. Um, what is the pricing like? And is it the agency side that pays for it? Is it the carrier side? Is it
It's
divided?
Yeah, it depends who the buyer is. So our pricing right now is around producers, so active producers that you're managing in the system. We support folks transacting with NIPR. We don't charge transaction fees for that. We think about that more in a traditional SaaS model of if I'm onboarding you as a producer and I'm going to work with you through your life cycle, as long as you're an actively producing agent with me, then that's how we're going to do the pricing. We have a couple different ways, with APIs or some more traditional API pricing on call usage. But we wanted to keep it simple from the start. There's a lot of complexity that can come in, and like we felt per agent per month was the right way for us to tackle it.
Okay, perfect. Is it a super long-term commitment, or can we try it out for a couple months, see how we feel about it?
Yeah, so right now our product is, minimum 1 year.
Okay, one
Given
year is decent.
Yeah, we generally do a little bit longer contracts, but trying it out for we're not yet in the product space where we can do more of like I would think of PLG of like trying it out for a couple of months. That's actually something that we're looking at right now in terms of how do we best serve the whole market. So the way that our product was designed, while it solves the use case for a small agency, the way it's deployed might not be the most effective way for a smaller agency to use it. We have a core part of our product built on the Force.com Salesforce platform, which is great, super robust in terms of permissions and APIs and reporting. But it's a little bit of a different beast than just, maybe logging into agentsync.io and looking at some data there. And so we're exploring how do we actually bring our feature set to a larger part of the market. But right now it's a year if you're going to sign up.
Perfect, perfect. Um, is is there a like minimum number of agents for it to really make sense? Like we're talking like at least five producers kind of thing.
Yeah, generally we actually think about it in terms of a complexity threshold. So what we've found, we've had very small customers who have intention to grow, right? So maybe I'm 5 student agents now, but I know I want to grow. I want to grow to 50 to 80 agents, and I'm going to do that across all 50 states or across 10 states. And that's when we think about a complexity threshold. We have a product that's in early access right now for contracting with carriers. It's a similar idea. If you're in one state, if you have 5 agents and you're only working in one state and you're contracting with 5 carriers, your complexity threshold might not be high enough for a product like ours. But if you are working in 50 states and you're having to think about all of that, or you're working with 15, 20 carriers and you have 20 agents, you start to layer that complexity. Now I have to think about, is this agent licensed in all the right states? Okay, did I put all the paperwork through for all the carriers that they're going through? And that's where we excel. We really look at what does it look like for someone and individual to maintain a population that is not homogenous, because we know that not every agent works in exactly the same set of states. Not every part of your distribution is going to operate the same way. So we think about it more from that complexity framework of number of states, number of carrier relationships, and number of agents, and then that will kind of set the amount of work your team is doing, really, right? And how much time they're spending on it, and how many licensing admins are being taken out to lunch because they really need, they're really, the lifeblood. And then our goal is to help those admins be able to support larger agent populations, and so that's how we really think about what we solve.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the rule of thumb for the listener might be if when you multiply number of agents by number of states by number of carriers, you're into like the high hundreds, then it probably makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely will make sense. Yeah. And there's,
Okay.
and depends on also, like I said, you're kind of, there's where you are today, where you want to be in the next year. When we thought about it as well, and what Niji saw at Zenefits was, how do we make an unlock for someone who today might not have a level of complexity, but in the next year or two wants to be able to pursue that and wants to have a really solid baseline of onboarding efficiency and compliance workflows on day one. So as they scale their complexity, they've got it covered, versus scaling their complexity and having one poor person run around with a spreadsheet and then suddenly have that person kind of crack. We can come in early and help with that for future looking planning.
Okay. Uh, what kind of feedback are you getting from the users, from the clients? And by the way, feel free to use company names if you want to, don't need to.
Yeah. Um, one something that I have observed, and I got the advantage a couple years ago to speak at a conference where someone on it was for a carrier conference. Someone on stage was talking about how insurance has historically been an apprenticeship model. And I think about that a lot in terms of what does it look like to empower teams that historically had to do a lot of training and handoffs to use technology to carry some of that burden. So we hear it's been very fun to hear feedback from customers when they realize that they don't have to spend a lot of cycle times on, I'd call that like rote learning of like what's happening with
We might be frozen.
this state and this system do it. I think really to tackle other activities. The other thing that I think a lot about product feedback for us, but it's just been an interesting industry trend. I think on the carrier side, we're hearing it a lot, and then it's to benefit of agency.
I do think it caught up.
We might have lost you.
I think you're back now. You can
Oh,
hear me? Okay. So to the benefit of
okay.
agency, it was the
Yes, I
last
can.
I heard.
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that we've been hearing in the market over the last, I would say, 4 years has been a big shift from the carrier side, but also to the benefit of agencies, is a shifting sense of what white glove looks like in a world where we have better technology to serve customers. And when I think about a customer there, it's the producer. And what I mean by that is uh, we now have a lot more technology and ability to allow you to self-serve some of your data from the carrier. Where am I in a distribution hierarchy? What's going on with the onboarding of my agent? When we first started the company, which was now 7 years ago, we'd say, how do you think about self-service? And it was kind of like people don't want self-service. We have this admin team. We don't know. And now there's a lot more, how do we help with self-service? And not because we want to then leave the agent on their own, but because then we can actually have our resources focus on the really tricky challenges that the agent is focusing on, right? If they have policy questions or something around underwriting, instead of having us spend a lot of calories on tracking your name change or your address change or answering a question for you about where you're sitting in a distribution hierarchy, you can answer that question and you can ask me a really informed question, and I can get into the meat of supporting you as an agent more effectively. So that's some of the feedback that I get really excited about. My past life, I spent a lot of time thinking about supporting sales individuals with technology, and our job was always to let the seller sell and give them all the tools that they need to sell. And I think about that for the insurance agent a lot, is how do we help that agent go spend their time with the customer, with the client, asking those questions? How do we support them better, as an industry in terms of answering those questions? And we think our role in technology is helping that agent be the most informed agent they can about the relationship they have with the carrier so that they can have the most effective dialogue with that carrier. So that's what I get excited about when I see kind of what's changing and
It's
what feedback
fantastic.
we're getting and what people get excited about is, yeah, it's really about data and self-serve and, kind of looking towards a future where we have more dynamic relationships and things are not as siloed.
Perfect. That's a great segue into kind of my final question, which is what's in the development pipeline that coming out this year or whatever that you're excited about and you can already talk about.
Yeah. I mentioned it earlier. Over the last year, I got an opportunity to spend time with a kind of new product line that we've been developing. It's really around contracting is what we called it to start. I think it's a bit of a limiting name, so we'll see. We call it early access, but it was a evolution for us. There was always a gap in our offerings in terms of helping agencies establish that first relationship with a carrier, as well as continuously onboard agents to a carrier. And that product for us is going to be coming out of early access at the end of this year. I get really excited about it because it actually is helping us streamline the connectivity between agencies and carriers in a very meaningful way, as well as look at patterns across workflows and really think about what is the most efficient way for us to help folks capture data upfront so that they can get through all of the different packets and all of the different ways that they're interacting in the most efficient way. And so it was a very eye-opening thing for me because I had come from a little bit of the different angle. I'd come more from the licensing angle, and now I'm seeing what's upstream of licensing or downstream. I don't know if this kind of interesting piece. And I'm very, very excited for what it's going to mean for our customer base as well as, in the industry to have that standardized way to get through these workflows, even though the paperwork is not standard. We can really make the user experience and what that looks like for an agent and the folks supporting them a much, much better experience. So that's what's currently top of mind for me in rounding out our offering.
Fantastic. I have to say, I just thought of this. Um, Very often people, since I interview so many insurtech founders, very often people ask me what I see nowadays compared to 6, 7 years ago. And I tend to reply that 6, 7 years ago we were hearing a lot of we're gonna set up a full stack carrier and put State Farm out of business in 5 years. And now that's not at all right. A lot of disruption. Now it's very much uh, we've identified a real problem in
Mhm.
one little piece of the insurance transaction, uh, and we've created fantastic set of tools to make that one issue work really, 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 really well.
Yep.
And you guys are a perfect example of that. Basically, and I especially love the fact that like I can think of few things that are less interesting than compliance and licensing. They're important, but they're not exciting. Uh, and this from a guy that finds insurance very exciting.
Yeah.
But basically, I want to use you guys as an example and be like, what I'm seeing more and more is efforts like AgentSync, where they grab something as boring as licensing, but that was a painful thing, a real problem. It's not a hey, I have this cool tech toy looking for a tech hammer looking for an insurance nail, but rather we've identified a real problem that's painful and that damages that makes insurance harder to do
Yep.
and
Yeah.
will
And
make it fantastic.
yeah, and it's interesting because obviously have a bias, but I find licensing very fascinating. And the more I've learned about it, it's such a critical piece. It is, uh, I find it exciting as a technologist to be able to find patterns in things and then figure out the most efficient way to tackle them. And it is one of the hardest problems I've ever had to think about was coming into the US insurance market and trying to figure out how to make sense of all of this in a way that actually met, to your point, our customer needs, right? This isn't a invented problem. This is a real problem. And one of some of the greatest moments is when I've had someone who's been an admin for 20 years go through the flow and like the light bulb goes off and they're like, this this does it. This does it. This does the thing I did. This does the thing I was teaching someone. It's like it's such a great moment. That's what I love about being in this
Uh,
market is there's real challenging problems. You have to be ready to do 50 variations of something, but it's a lot of fun if you dig in.
57, if I'm not mistaken, the
Yes,
exact number.
correct. Yeah,
Uh,
correct.
uh, the fact that this is some of the hardest problems you have found is super interesting, given your background, having gone through Dropbox and through Stripe, right? So first through at Dropbox, the large files
Hmm.
in a secure way has to have been really complicated, and then at Stripe, payments, right? It has to have been really complicated. So the fact that you found insurance to be more complex than that validates what we tell people all the time. This is just a really, really complex industry.
It's a really, really complex industry, and yeah, I think it's just it's a fun challenge, and I got to work in those companies and see. I didn't get to work on the product side, but I got to see a lot about how that was tackled, and I think payments. Payments has a very similar level of complexity. Obviously, there's a whole bunch more on that and fraud and the finance side. But when you think about building systems that have to contend with multiple regulations and multiple rules, and that obviously has all the fun of time zones and currency changes and all that. But it's like anyone who underestimates the U.S. insurance market or thinks that they're going to be the one who just makes it all standardized. I like it because I said you have to really think about the system as it is and not fight the system, but, build your systems informed on that and think about how to evolve them. And I find that just be a particularly interesting
I,
challenge.
I think that is great advice for future insurtech founders. Uh, don't fight the system. Uh, improve it from where it is. I don't think that's how you put it, but I think that's really great advice for future founders. But thank you so much for your time today. Super super interesting, and I love people who are passionate and nerdy about whatever area of our industry that they're working in, and that definitely comes across. Um, th- what is it, 7 years now?
Hmm.
That is a lifetime in insurtech. That makes you guys a very 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 mature in insurtech. When this goes live, I will tag both you and the company on LinkedIn. In the show notes, I'm including for the listeners the episode with Niji. Uh, yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Shodi. It's awesome.